Good morning, hearty welcome to this event. My name is Detlef Fechtner. I'm Deputy Editor of Börsen-Zeitung, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Börsen-Zeitung, excuse me, and I'm the moderator of this event, and I have the privilege, and moreover, I have the pleasure to lead you through the next hour. I have very short announcements to make before we start. Housekeeping, the first thing is that everybody of us has a lot of things to do, especially to finish before Christmas. So we will conclude this session, this seminar, sharply at 1 o'clock. You can trust. Second is, it's not a discussion in front of you, it's a discussion with you. So we would hardly encourage you to ask questions. You can ask questions by sending it to the email address streaming@lv-brüssel.hessen.de. streamline@lv-brüssel.hessen.de. Thank you for participation. Thank you very much. And third announcement to make is, well, we have a perfect timing with this seminar. We are in the middle of the negotiations. The bad thing about it is that if you have a perfect timing like this, then you have the risk that you lose one of your panelists, and that's what happened to us. Paulina Dežmek-Hack, she has to be now in negotiations with the United States in the negotiating team, and I think it's in all our interest that she's not with us explaining why nobody negotiate anymore, but is for negotiating. We have found somebody who will jump in. Very happy, Almoro, Rubin, Cervin, to have you. Thank you very much for jumping in and joining us. He's not just a replacement, he knows very much about the issue that we are talking today, and so we are very happy to welcome you. And the last thing is, this is a discussion. We will have the panel in English. English is the lingua franca today, but you have seen and you can follow this in German as well if you use the relevant link. Without further ado, ich möchte gerne jetzt.
Now I switch into English for some introductory words, and the only part that will be actively in German here with the Secretary of State for European Affairs in Brussels, so well-known person Markus Weinmeister. So we're looking forward to your welcome address. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you to the joint digital event today in Brussels. I would have liked to be in Brussels, but for unknown reasons, not possible. But it's an important topic, so I would have loved that by now we would have something concrete to tell you concerning the future cooperation between the European Union and the United Kingdom or Great Britain. But unfortunately, we haven't reached that point yet, so it's an important topic for us today. The future relationships between both partners in questions linked to the financial sector. For us in Hessen, with the financial center of Frankfurt is really important. The financial center of London is the #1 spot in this area in Europe, of course. So we have connections linking both, and it's important how the sector will be organized in the future. So on the one hand, we have, of course, the hope that Great Britain will continue to be a strong partner for us, but that will not take up opportunities in the question of deregulation or concerning standards to have an advantage in the competition that would make the situation difficult for us. On the other side, 40% of financial products being sold in London go towards the European Union. So that's the reason why Great Britain must be interested in a good cooperation between both sides. And how will this have repercussions on Frankfurt? The passport is not valid any longer. So a lot of financial services will have to try and find a new center, a new connecting point on the European continent. Frankfurt would be a good position. The figures of last month have shown that Frankfurt is being accepted as such, but we need a good cooperation nevertheless. We need strong standards and strong rules as well, allowing us to continue to work and allowing the financial sector to advance as well. So I hope that today's event will deliver a few insights and impulses because we are waiting on a daily basis for a very strong result for the future cooperation between the European Union and the UK. And I hope that we will have a successful ending of these negotiations for today's event. I hope that there will a very good basis talked about for future cooperation in the financial sector in the European Union.
Meister, vielen herzlichen Dank, Herr Staatssekretär.
Thank you, Secretary of State.
We have a special perspective from the Financial Center of Frankfurt on this issue of the future relationship. Without further ado, I will introduce the three panelists that will discuss all these issues around. I will start with Markus Ferber. Herr Ferber, you graduated as civil engineer, you worked with Siemens, you worked with other companies. In '94, you joined European Parliament, and since then you are a key player, especially in the Econ Committee. Whenever you talk in Brussels about financial services, it's very good to talk to you and to get your opinion. Thank you for being with us. We are happy to have you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
As zweiten, on the second, I will introduce Andreas Krautscheid, lawyer, member of the German Bundestag. He has a company history as well with Ready-Mix, a producer of concrete, and with Deutsche Telekom. And I got to know him in his capacity as Minister for European and Federal Affairs in North Rhine-Westphalia. You worked as a politician for years, and now you representing the Bundesverband Deutsche Banken since 2011. You are with the Federation of the German private banks, and I say hello to the managing director of the BDP. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mr. Krautscheid.
Hello.
And last but definitely not least, our special guest, to say it like this, because he jumped in the last days, Almoro, Rubin de Cervin. You are economist, you studied at Bocconi, and since 2000 you are with the European Commission. You worked on a lot of issues like competition, industry, political coordination, international affairs, a lot of things that are very helpful for this discussion. And you are now here in your capacity as head of international affairs unity in FISMA, in the Financial Service Department. So we are very happy. Welcome, Almoro, Rubin de Cervin, and the floor is yours for a keynote, for a short impulse where we are at the moment. Please.
Thank you, Detlef, for the kind words of introduction, and thanks to Andreas for the invitation. And I really look forward to the discussion. Needed apologies from Paulina. The negotiations are going on and on and on. And we don't know if and when they will be concluded. But I'm afraid I won't say anything about the negotiations. And it's at the same time too sensitive. Frankly, I'm not close enough on what is happening in the room. So I'll focus more on the financial services side, which I've been following. And I wanted to do this in two parts. One is to look at the short term, and then looking at the future, even if I must say the future is in 2 weeks. So the short term is 2 weeks, and then the future is what happens from 2 weeks from now. So the short term is that on the 1st of January, there will be a regime change for financial services, as also the representative from the Hessen government was saying. The authorization will expire, and so there will be a significant change on how market participants can operate. Firms actually know this, have known this all along, and they have prepared. Also, thanks to the role of supervisors at national European level, to the communication of the European supervisory authorities and to the work actually of the Commission. We provided a lot of information to also manage expectations, several communications on preparedness. Preparation for firms involved costs. They had to set up subsidiaries, in particular for firms coming in Europe. They had to transfer contracts. They had to move people. The market participants made preparations based on their own business model and own interests. Nobody was forcing them. It's a choice depending on which clients they had and which segment they wanted to work with. And the situation, it seems, and I'll be cautious, but it seems actually that the preparation is completed and the markets are prepared. That's the assessment made also by the UK authorities. There might be volatility because we don't know how the next days will come out. Might be some limited disruption, but the overall assessment is that the preparation is complete. And indeed, you also saw probably in the Financial Times this morning about how big this was, this preparation. We had more than 1 trillion assets were moved from the UK to the EU. Infrastructure have started to operate in the EU. Contracts with EU clients, in particular retail contracts, for instance, in insurance, have been transferred to EU subsidiaries. So actually, the work has been done. What is interesting also that the relocation of activities or the adaptation of the financial system has not concentrated in a single financial center in the EU. Actually, this was something that at the beginning we were expecting, that they were moving from one center to the other. Actually, we saw banks and firms moving and infrastructures to different centers, bringing to some specialization also for the financial centers themselves, and actually reinforce the multi-centric structure of the European financial system, which is a key aspect of capital markets union going forward. There were two risks in this context. One was clearing and the other was settlement. On clearing, we took a decision in September, and then ESMA recognized the UK CCPs, and we gave a clear indication to market participants, a clear time horizons to reduce exposures to UK infrastructures in the meantime, to avoid that there is an element of mutual dependency. And in settlement, we took a decision recently, and ESMA is working on the recognition on the CSD, to allow the completion for the transfer for Irish issuers. So these were the two specific issues. And there are no more other risks for financial stability. I think it's important. Let me say one word of equivalence, which is something both present and future, and which will be the main but not only instrument. The work we've done was to do an assessment of the UK regime in 28 areas in parallel. It's been a huge exercise on our side. And we used the process that we use with all third countries. So we did questionnaires. And we had including also some questions on where the UK was going in terms of regulation, because they had stated very clearly that they wanted to move out. We received several thousand pages of replies, which we are assessing. The assessment was, however, impacted by an event which took place in September, which was the steps that the UK was taking to contradict what had agreed in the withdrawal agreement. And that brought a significant breach of trust between the two parties. And trust is fundamental for equivalence. It is actually the main component of equivalence. Without trust, frankly, equivalence cannot work. The issue seems to be solved now. But given where we are in terms of timing, I see equivalence of something exactly for the future. So hopefully we start from a clean sheet as of January. Maybe a word on the UK equivalence, because they have on two aspects. One, they have they've taken a policy approach. They have put forward a document. It was on 9th of November, actually very similar to our own communication on equivalence of July 19, including on the issues of withdrawals, where they have been very critical towards us, but they will admit themselves that they might need to withdraw equivalence on short notice, because that's something that you might need to do for financial stability purposes if the other side is making things that actually might threaten your stability. Not something that we do, and we actually never did withdraw on a short notice. And the second thing that the UK did was to adopt a batch of decisions, which they were clearly taken on the base of their own interest, and they looked actually, they started from non-contentious areas, and they clearly indicated that the more complicated areas would require interactions, which is something we hope to do next year. So let me finally go to look future. I'll try to be short, so to leave more space for discussion. What we hope to have in place, actually to set up, is a framework for cooperation, but an informal framework, not a formal binding one. An informal, which should be also intense, because we have a lot of interdependence, and inclusive. And when I'm saying inclusive, is I hope that it's a task on us to be inclusive with member states, with MEPs, and with industry, because it has to be a collective effort in cooperating between the EU, UK. It's not something the Commission can or should do alone. And we hope to progressively build an equivalence framework. And I think we see it as a medium to long term, not a short term issue. Because if we build it progressively, it can be a stable framework. And I think that matters most, much more than the short term dimension. Equivalence is a medium term instrument. It's not something that you should use for short term issues. And that would actually what should nourish the regulatory cooperation framework. We have more than 30 areas of equivalence, plus all issues in relation to financial stability and new developments. It will be challenging. Cooperation will be complicated because, for various reasons, the UK will be tempted to diverge, even in finance, wherever it can, because that's a bit the nature of the Brexit exercise. And so it would be very complicated for us to see where their divergence actually makes sense and it's not impacting, and where actually their divergence is potentially impacting. We are also a moving target because we change our framework constantly. So we're not a stable thing to which they relate. Actually, we will be both moving and changing our own framework. Now, it's easier when we deal with new issues. So probably it's easier to have cooperation in the future on green finance or on digital issues, which are new developments, even if actually there is also the risk that these areas are used for competitiveness purposes. So it's easier but still complicated. Where there is going to be more complicated is where we have significant interdependence. And the second area of difficulty is how will we face situations where firms will try to do regulatory arbitrage, will exploit loopholes, try to take advantages of the two regimes. That also will bring complicated discussions, but we'll see. So very much we see 2021 actually a start for a long-term relationship. And actually, as the FT article was saying, it will take time. And I see more this as a medium to long-term issue. So I hope that we settle the negotiations in a positive way, and then we are able to construct and build a positive agenda on finance going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Almoro. That was very helpful and fruitful because you have already mentioned a lot of issues that we will discuss now. You mentioned the significant changes. You mentioned the preparedness, the state of preparedness. You mentioned the issue of clearing, and we will discuss this definitely later. And you mentioned the keyword of equivalence and whatever it can do and where its limits lies. We will discuss this in a second. I will start the discussion with Andreas Krautscheid. Mr. Krautscheid, what are your expectations, your concerns? We will talk a lot about the medium term, but let's start with the short term. When you're looking ahead on 1st of January, what are your expectations?
Yeah, hello from Berlin to everybody who is following our discussion, and warm thanks to our colleagues on the podium, to Almoro, who jumped in for Paulina. Thank you very much for this, and Markus Ferber, who is a very well proven fighter on the Brexit battleground. So very interesting to have the views from the Parliament on the actual situation. And to be open, we had hoped that we could discuss today on the basis of a deal. So we are well aware what Paulina and friends are doing actually, and how tough the work is. Still. So the President of the Commission, von der Leyen, has told us this morning that there has opened a narrow path to find a solution. And to be true, after 2 extremely hard years of work on all these matters, of thousands of people in all the parts of Europe, at the end of the day, it cannot fail with herrings and mackerel. Sorry, these things are too important. We are talking about. I know that there are always symbolical things in politics, but I think Almoro has already described very well the topics that we have discussed and managed over the last 24 months. And we are extremely grateful not only to those people in the negotiating teams on both sides, actually, because we are well aware how tough this work is. We're also grateful for a lot of support from the Commission, from the supervisors, the ECB, the Bundesbank, and all the national supervisors who dealt with all these problems. So Almoro described already the things that have been done and have been fixed already. He seems to be very relaxed. Do the bankers sleep well, completely well? Almost. Let's say almost. We think we have prepared us very, very intensively and very well. We try to cover all those topics. There are still some small things open, which could let us sleep even better. But it was already mentioned, we knew from the very beginning of the negotiations that financial markets aspects wouldn't be a big part in these negotiations. We have only very few trade deals where those aspects are really of a dominant factor. So we knew that we would have to rely on other parts of the European toolkit, and this means especially the question of adequacy. And I think we've got a lot of decisions that help us to stabilize the system. But at the end of the day, we have all to be aware adequacy decision is not passporting. This is a different situation. It helps us to avoid cliff edge effects and loopholes and all these things. But at the end of the day, it is not the same stability. So this, you have to keep it in mind. And Almoro also gave us already what you say, the future is in 2 weeks, okay? What will happen then? And if we have to live with this situation, even if there is no deal, we have to rely, even if there would be a deal, so also, we have to rely on adequacy as the only bridge between those two marketplaces. And for us and the banks and the financial institutions, we had only one target from the very beginning. We want to be able to serve our customers, private and business people, as well as secure and on the same level of security, on the same service level as we did before Brexit. Are we there already? We don't know. We believe that we can do that. But as Almoro also already described, there is not a move from one place to another. We know that there have been moved enormous assets from London to the continent. Many people are moving. A lot of IT and other work has been done. So at the end of the day, and that was what we had expected, is not move from one center to another, but we have now a very intensive, separated market in Europe. I don't know at the end of the day if it is a strength, because Almoro mentioned specialization, for instance, in Luxembourg, in Ireland, in Paris, and Frankfurt, or is it a question at the end, a fact of weakness? So we will see that in the next months. And this is one argument why the work of Parliament and all the other institutions on the Capital Markets Union is even more important than it has been ever before, because we have to stabilize the system and to strengthen this financial market system on the continent, because we know at the end of the day, we cannot rely that everything works the same way as before. This is the consequence of Brexit. This is one of the unavoidable effects. But I'm close to Almoro, sleeping almost very well.
Thank you, Andreas Krautscheid. So, Markus Ferber, the same question to you about your concerns, your expectations for start of January. The Commission seems to be cool. The Bankenverband seems to be almost relaxed. How's about you? How's about the Parliament?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm always relaxed on those issues because that is always a good advice, being relaxed. But unfortunately, we are not only negotiating fish because I think that could be solved, but we are discussing at the moment the question of level playing field, and that is important for financial services as well. But on the other hand, let us be very clear, the world will not come to an end 1st of January, and I hope the sun will rise again, even if we will have fog. So I do not expect any major disruptions following Brexit, especially in the financial area. But if you want to be a little bit cynical, we could say that the withdrawal of equivalent status to Switzerland for their share trading business was somewhat of a small-scale test run for what to come. And you might know that I have been personally very critical of the decision to withdraw the equivalent status of Switzerland, as it was not justified on substance. One positive takeaway was that now we can be reasonably sure that such a regime change can be done without a major hiccup and with little risk to financial stability. That was the experience. So the biggest risk for financial stability would have been in the area of clearing, which is why the Commission, and it has been said already, has signaled early on that the transition for clearing will be longer and therefore has granted temporary equivalence for UK CCPs. But I hope that those who are using this kind of business are bringing more and more contracts to the continent using the UK word. With the Swiss example in mind, I'm confident that the 1st of January will come and go without major disruptions. That being said, the Swiss example also teaches us a different, less pleasant lesson. It is by no means a given that European venues and market participants will automatically benefit from the UK not being deemed equivalents anymore. On the contrary, it is likely that a good chunk of what used to be EU business being done in the UK pre-Brexit will not move to Frankfurt or Paris, but maybe to New York or Singapore. Such an outcome would also reflect the EU's failure to make sufficient progress with the Capital Markets Union, and that has been addressed by Mr. Krautscheid as well, which I fully support, because that is something we really have to work on now. And everyone knew that Capital Markets Union should be ready before Brexit takes place, whether there's an agreement or there's no agreement, because honestly, on the financial area, where we don't have any blueprints, where we don't have any experience, where we don't have WTO standards, it was clear that the only solving issue is the principle of equivalence. And the blueprint will be, as next year we have to implement Basel III final, how United Kingdom and European Union are implementing these Basel remarks as UK is leaving European Union, but for example, not the Basel Agreement. And therefore, that will be a first blueprint how the things are going to be developed in the future.
Yeah, I will take up this issue. Thank you very much, Markus Ferber, for giving me this issue. Almoro, even being relaxed, but what will happen if Basel will be implemented quite differently, divergently in UK and in the European Union? You know, all the controversial issues. What's happening and how robust is this principle of equivalence, of adequacy. Can we talk about this bridge? How robust is this bridge? And what will happen if there will be divergency in let's say, Basel issues?
No, thanks, Detlef, and thanks also to Andreas and Markus for the comment. I don't know if I appear relaxed, maybe because I'm speaking from home, and maybe because also we are in a situation also because we prepared for 4 years and a half. So, and we see that the preparations we made, and I think I tend to agree with Markus, probably the first days in January we will see little, also because there's plenty of holidays around. We might see a bit more elements. Also, we had seen some contingency measures at the member states level in the area of their competence. So I'm relaxed. I don't know if that's the right word, and I won't tell you how I'm sleeping. I think that's too personal. No, I think it's indeed the theme of the Basel implementation is probably the first major challenge going forward. Leaving on one side equivalence and the bilateral, because it would be a test for both sides on the ability of trying to work in sync. And there, I think it's a challenge for both sides. It's a challenge on the UK because they might tempt to say that they are completely committed to international standards, but maybe play at the margin saying that there are UK specificities. And it's a challenge also for the EU side, because we also might want to play, and there are a lot of noise about that, on playing for EU specificities. And so how much will we both be close to the Basel standard or not? I think it's a question that is valid for both of us and for the bilateral relation. So it's one of the areas where I was mentioning the cooperation will be complicated because we will be both moving targets. And so I think that's also a question for our own policy making. And definitely Brexit brings a complexity in policy making in financial services, because even where we will be, so we need to be sure that we remain rule makers and we don't become rule takers. That's one of the key objectives actually of our approach. But even when we will be rule makers, we will have to always have to look at the UK dimension in terms of arbitrage or not lowering the standards. So, and how what we will be doing or what they will be doing will impact how our banks operate or how our markets function. So it's going to be a very complicated theme which will cut across all areas. And indeed, Basel will see, but it's a test also for us.
Yes, thank you. Andreas Krautscheid, I will come in a second to you with the question of legal certainty and if equivalence is a robust bridge for really be certain, legally certain to do business. But first of all, I would like to directly ask Markus Ferber, could you imagine that, like Almoro said just a second before, that the parliament and the legislator has to think about, well, what can we do, what the UK can do as well? So is there always a green elephant from now on in the room when we work on financial regulation, that everybody has to see, well, we first have to discuss that with our UK friends before we can go so far? Or will that be totally ignoring and saying, well, they have to follow? Can you give us a taste about your expectation?
Yeah, of course, that will be one of those elephants in the room. I don't know which color. Green is a nice idea because when we have to implement the Green Deal, of course, we will have to answer the question as well, what services can the financial sector provide for the real economy to achieve the goals we have set for ourselves. And you remember that a few days ago, the head of states have agreed on a target of 55% reduction till 2030. And of course, all parts of economy have to deliver their slice for the solution. And that means financial services as well. And that will be, of course, an issue where we will have some divergence between United Kingdom and European Union. On the other hand, as I said, Basel is a standard which is not for European Union, but for international. I think in the main areas, UK has to follow Basel standards as well as we have to. But if you look in the details, there are a lot of possibilities to find adjustments and the flexibility. And if we use this kind of flexibility in a different way than other parts in the world will do, we will have in any case some problems in the competition, especially for international active industries who can do a choice where to have access to financial products, whether in European Union or outside. As I said, it's not only London, there are other liquid places in the world available as well, as long as there's a minimum level of equivalence to use these marketplaces. So, of course, we have always looked what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Asia, but the experience in the past was that we've been the front runners and others followed us. So my favorite example is regulation for high-frequency trading, for example. It was European Union who established a standard, and United States picked it up later, and even Asia has picked it up. And the same goes now for taxonomy. We are the front runners and other markets are going to follow. And therefore the question will be how close United Kingdom will follow us. I don't think that UK will become the front runner and we have to follow. But we have to be aware that the front runner always takes a look in the mirror to see whether there's still someone behind him to follow, or are we alone on the way? And therefore, I think as long as it is an elephant and not a mosquito, we will be able to see what's happening behind us in the mirror.
Yeah, thank you very much, Markus Ferber. Andreas Krautscheid, question for you. I already announced that I would like to speak about legal certainty. How robust is, if equivalence works, given that it works and that there is not too much divergence, can you put as a bank money in some business when you have not the 100% legal certainty that this will last for years?
Actually, yes, you can rely, but as I mentioned already, there's a difference. It's a change. So if you compare it with the street system, the remaining passporting system is a highway, very reliable, clear, one direction, so it works. So now we have with all this equivalence decisions, we have small streets because there is an inherent momentum of insecurity in every decision on adequacy. Why? It is most of the time it is restricted to one certain topic. It is limited in time, and it can be withdrawn. This is typical for adequacy decisions. And that means there is a momentum of uncertainty. But, and this is one argument why we would like to discuss also a reform of the EU adequacy system to make it more reliable. But we have to work with the existing system. And for me, it was funny to observe over the last months, because this is a highly political question. In some European heads, there was always the concern, oh, what about this adequacy? They could change their rules. Sorry, change of rules is necessary in the next years. We will also have to change our rules. So that is not a situation which is fixed in concrete. The task that we have to fulfill is to make these changes reliable and foreseeable for all market participants. So, and this is why if you live in a system of adequacy, you need a very trustful relationship with your partners. And that means every participant in this game. That means there has to be established, and they are working on that. We know that very, very well. For instance, between regulators and supervisors, there has to be a very intensive, constant exchange. If one of the both sides sees the necessity to change things, let us know. Let us talk about. Perhaps we have the same view. Let's talk early. Let's talk trustful. Yeah, because don't try to create a situation where what already was mentioned, where for instance there is the attempt to not to follow the own rules, but also to find loopholes and so on. So if we talk about future in 2 weeks, that means there is still a small gap for some adequacy decisions. I would like to mention that because data flows is not completely covered until now, and we need those adequacy decisions to establish absolutely reliable workflow and to find that that also the safe flow of data helps us to have a very strong business continuity. So this is data, and the other thing, there's some delicate problem in the area of derivatives trading, where we have the DTO problem, which is not clearing in itself, but also it's the small time period before where you are obliged to trade activities on platforms, and not all these platforms that are existing actually in the UK are already have already this declaration of equivalence. So you have to do it on the continent. They are not all perfectly ready. So if you do this trade on a platform in the UK, you cannot trust totally what the legal situation is. So you have contracts that are legally correct in UK, but not legally correct on the continent. So that these are some open questions we have to deal with. But at the end of the day, yes, it's not the highway of passporting, but it's much better than working on the WTO level, which would be the other alternative. So we are in the middle. It works. It can work. We need adequacy for all those single things. And at the end of the day, adequacy, be aware, it's not a fixed, concrete, fixed system. It's a living system. It must be a living system. And we have to do it and to manage it in a way that all the market participants have security and foreseeability. What changes will come, and is it accepted by the other side?
Yeah, but a very short follow-up. Well, the idea of close cooperation, talking about the critical issues and first speak and then do and then regulate, this is nice to have, but is this possible in a system where we have the chance to withdraw from the European side on short notice? I know that you were talking about a different or adjusted framework for the whole adequacy system. Can it work as long as there is always this Damocles of, well, they can withdraw within just a few weeks or months? What do you say?
We have to accept from the regulators and from the political side that the possibility of withdrawal must be there. Yeah, it's clearly, and it is absolutely okay. But question is, in which time period? 30 days, 60 days, longer, with a very early announcement, because the market participants have need time to adjust to the new situation. If you say, okay, well, I will withdraw my adequacy decision within the next 4 weeks, it is not possible to establish a adequate and secure system that fits to the new legal situation. So I think foreseeability and time periods, this is things we should discuss. But what we see actually, because everyone on both sides is absolutely aware on the risk that we still have in this situation. I do not, I'm not seeing that the British side will play games in the first week after in January or in the second. Yes, they are thinking about how to make their own system more efficient and so on, reduce costs and so on and so on. Maybe that there are also some good ideas. So let's talk about it early. Let's talk about it very trustful. And at the end of the day, European Commission will give their judgment and say, okay, still adequate or not? But let us know this early, reliable, and let us know what you want instead of this. And then all the market participants will follow, because our highest interest is market stability.
Thank you, Andreas Krautscheid. Now I have two questions from the audience, and I would like to address to the representatives of the Commission and the Parliament, to you, Almoro, and to you, Markus Ferber. I give you the two questions, and maybe you answer on the two of them. The first one is, it's a 2-hour issue that we discussed within the second. How can we embed in our own legislation, for example, IFM or MiFID, which is up for review, the monitoring of the UK's future divergence? What shape could this take? This is the one question. Second question is, would it not be better to have a consensus on 10 big points, better than have a no deal? This is a more political question. So we start with Almoro, and then Markus Ferber is to follow. Please.
No, thank you. I don't think the monitoring of UK divergence or UK developments is a question of EU legislation. The UK will become a third country. It is already a third country. It will be a third country. We will have equivalence in place. We hope to have a stable system of equivalence. We don't like, I'm from the Financial Stability Directorate General, so we are in favor of financial stability and hope to have a stable framework. Obviously, the divorce context makes it complicated, but looking forward, I hope to put in place something stable. It will take time. And so we will monitor that as we will monitor other equivalence decisions. But it's not something for the legislation to put, and even less to put the legislation that we've monitored the UK. Now, on the consensus on the political question, can we just agree on a few small set of issues? Actually, the EU approached the divorce asking for a broad partnership with the UK, because it has taken the long-term view that we will be neighbor, we will have to cooperate. Let's set up a partnership between the EU and the UK. And the UK government has taken, frankly, an opposite view. They wanted actually a very small deal and the maximum liberty. Trying to maximize the advantages from the small deal, but they didn't want precisely this broad approach. And so I find it difficult that we just agree on a few set of issues and then we let out a lot of other themes. So we'll see the shape of the agreement if we are able to conclude it.
Okay, thank you, Markus Ferber.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think on the first question, the monitoring is important, but it's not a question of legislation. I fully agree with what has been said by the Commission. But I asked from the early beginning in my talks with Michel Barnier, to introduce a kind of surveillance authority or something like that, what we have in other areas as well. If you look, for example, for a European Free Trade Association with Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, we have a structure who follows what they are implementing, what we are implementing. So I'm still thinking that could be a good issue, but United Kingdom refused to accept that because one of the main propaganda lines was to become independent, to take over control again, and not to have EU officials in the country controlling them. So therefore, a monitoring process by a surveillance authority or something like that can't be implemented, as United Kingdom is not accepting it. So we have to do it on a case-by-case analysis, as long as we don't have an agreement. And the big 10 big points, United Kingdom had only one big point: full access to the single market without following our rules. And that is unacceptable for us. Yeah, we can't say, of course, the food market is 100% available for your products, but with your standards, with your subsidization of farmers, with your rulings. We never can grant that to anyone, neither to United Kingdom nor to anyone else. And therefore, this one point of United Kingdom, full access to single market, but staying outside, was never a landing zone for the European Union to accept. And that's why we are still negotiating, as this question of level playing field, which addresses this issue, is a key element. And even if we reduce figures and market shares, at the end of the day, even Canada has to fulfill our standards for the beef they are exporting to the European Union. And we have people from the European Union, from Commission, in Canada to control that. But Canada never said we lost control. But as that was the ideological background of the whole referendum, that's really hurting the negotiations. And therefore, it's a nice idea to identify 10 big points. Honestly, if you make an opinion poll in 27 member states, we will not be able to identify only 10. Yeah, that's one problem. But honestly, that would not solve the problems, as United Kingdom has a fully different approach on that.
Thank you, Markus Ferber. Andreas Krautscheid, let's have a word on the issue of euro clearing. It seems that even this issue was quite presented relaxed in a way. We have now, other deadlines. It's not disruptive. We don't have a cliff edge effect coming right now. But, what we heard from ESMA and from others is that in the medium term, there has to be some change of managing this issue. So what is your perspective from the Bankenverband on the issue of euro clearing? You think that is
yes.
or manageable?
As we have mentioned already, that means that we have now 18 months. This is a limited period where the actual situation is stable. So let's use this time. First, see how it works. I'm sure the actual situation is robust. So obviously there are some market participants who would perhaps hope that it's not only 18 months, but perhaps longer and longer. And on the other side, the Commission has very clearly expressed that she wants that this is a limited period. On the other hand, the Commission and all the participants had a very intensive exchange over the last months what to do exactly. And they know that is not a work that can be done within some days, weeks, or months. It's very complicated. It is very risky. So let's see how intensive the transfer that the Commission wants to see is developing in the next months. And let's discuss things perhaps in a little more relaxed situation that we did in the last 2 years, because it was every item, even if it looks very technical, every item was a little bit overloaded with political aspects. So maybe at the end of the day, when the work is done, when things are going well over the next months and we see how the system works, it is possible to discuss technical items in a simple technical way and not only in the political view on that. So there's hope that it is a stable system for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. The last word, the last question, and I would like to ask you to answer it within 1 minute. So just in a nutshell, Markus Ferber and Almoro. The question is, what do we expect from the banks now, and from the financial institutions? Because the banks have invited to this discussion, and maybe you can now invite them to do something. Markus Ferber, if you start, and Almoro Rubin, if you follow up, and please, in a nutshell, very short.
I try to be very short, but what I really would appreciate if the banks would start to develop things which are close to a capital markets union to show politicians how that can be achieved, that we can bring together the capital of the continent for our industries. And therefore, we still have a lot of problems. Legally, of course, insolvency law is missing, consumer protection is very different. But I think for businesses, there's a lot of possibility for deeper cooperation. And if banks are showing us to us how that can work, would be a good lesson for politicians and to follow that advice.
Thank you very much. Almoro, please.
I I completely agree with Markus. I think what we expect from the banks, I think they should invest in capital markets union, and also in the market infrastructures. And because this would help them, their international competitiveness as well. It would help the efficiency of the economy. It would help the strength of the euro. And it would also make actually the bilateral relation with the UK more stable. Because if banks are diversified and not entirely dependent on the bilateral relation, which is the case today in clearing, actually it makes the relation and the business model dependent on political decisions, which are influenced by a political situation, which unfortunately will not become simpler. It will be less contentious because we won't have the negotiations, but it will remain complicated. So I think investing in the European market for the European banks is, I think, the most important things, the best investment they could make. And actually that should strengthen their position globally, and that would actually help us making the equivalence a stable framework as Andreas was asking for.
Thank you very much, Almoro. Well, before Andreas Krautscheid will wrap up with a very short concluding remark, I would like to thank you, the panelists, and I would like to thank you, the audience, for your engagement, for your interest, and for your patience. Well, we heard that world will not come to an end on the 1st of January. That's the good message. I think there were a lot of other good messages within here, and maybe the message that Paulina has to sit now somewhere with the teams is the best message of everything, that people are still speaking with each other and the two parties speak together. I would like to say some words representing now the Landesvertretung. They asked me to tell you that this is the last event for this year. We are already 16th of December, so I think it's time for the last event in the Landesvertretung. And the Landesvertretung Friedrich von Heusinger and his team is wishing you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Stay healthy, bleiben Sie gesund. And well, our wish is that we will see you again on the 13th of January when we start with the first event in 2021. And it's again on finance issues. It's on sustainable finance. Very interesting point. So maybe we see you there. And now it's up to Andreas Krautscheid for the remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Detlef Fechtner. Also from the Banking Association, thank you to all our participants on the podium, for the moderator. Thank you for joining us on the internet. And thinking a little bit of Paulina's work in the team and the negotiators. Christmas, and I do not want to start the religious part now, but Christmas is not only for Christians a symbol of hope and positive change. So perhaps that is the right way to approach the last hours of negotiation. And yes, you asked what will happen 1st of January. There will be some chaos, but I'm sure that the finance industry will not give a big contribution to this chaos, because we try to do our best to fix all the things that we could fix. So I'm sure when all these smoking guns in the battle are put aside in the first months and things are going well, for me personally, having strong personal links to Britain and London, part of my legal education there, I cannot imagine that Britain is a third country like every other third country. So I think not only the financial business industry will have a strong interest to establish and to keep strong links. We have to work on that. That doesn't happen by itself. So I think we all can contribute to this job, and we will do from the Banking Association with our friends in the city, we will do our best that this stable and trustful relationship will remain. So it's on us to do this. For all of you, thank you very much for joining us. Stay healthy, take care, and have a good Christmas break. To see you all again, full of power and enthusiasm on all these things in the coming year. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.